Hello Booktube, welcome back to Gunpowder Fiction and Plot. I'm Scott, and today I'm going to talk about the novel Earthlings by Sayaka Murata, translated by Ginny Tapley Takamore. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to read out other people's reviews that I disagree with and break down why I think they're wrong and respond to them. I'm not doing that to fellow booktubers. These are anonymous people on the internet. Let me firstly give you a quick summary of Earthlings. This is in lieu of a review video. I really felt incapable of reviewing this novel. I've been mulling over it for weeks and weeks, and I don't know how to review it. It is one of the finest novels I have ever read. And every now and then I come across one of these books that is special and amazing. And last year I was lucky enough to come across 4, which was a ridiculously profitable year as far as reading is concerned. And in January I read Earthling, and I will have to include that as my first very special book of the year. I never expect to read one of these books, and frankly, if I get another book this year, if I get to 4 again this year, it'll be ridiculous. So to say that I like this book is an understatement, is essentially what I am getting at here. Let me also say about this novel is that if you have any content warnings, any trigger warnings that you won't read a book for, do not pick this novel up. It covers all of them, just all of them. I don't think I've read a novel that hits more trigger warnings in such a small space. But we can just start with rape, murder, sexual abuse, cannibalism, incest, and know that that's not the bottom of the barrel scraping. That's just the top of my head without really even considering what else there is going on. Like mental health is another one. So Sayaka Murata wrote Convenience Store Woman, and I do recommend that if you want to read Earthlings, to begin with Convenience Store Woman. The themes discussed in Convenience Store Woman are then picked up again in Earthlings, except it's done in a much more effective way. And I really think that having read Convenience Store Woman first, that primed my brain for what I was about to read. So that is my recommendation of it. Anyway, I'm going to read some reviews from a website. The website is a shop, so it's not Goodreads or Storygraph or anything like that. And I'm going to point out why they're wrong. In this discussion, I'm going to have a few spoilers. I don't believe that anything that I am discussing will spoil the novel for you. In fact, I believe that you'll be able to determine whether you like or dislike this novel because of this discussion that I'm having. And I believe that the joy in this novel is in seeing the execution. But nonetheless, if you are interested in the plot of this novel, I am completely ignoring that as a spoiler, and I am discussing that. And there are things that happen in this book that would be considered a spoiler that I am discussing freely. So fair warning on what I am and aren't discussing. But as I said, I think the beauty of this novel is in the execution. This is a literary fiction novel. This is not a genre fiction novel. Do not make that mistake because, yeah. So anyway, Mark Green from the United States says, 1 star. I really liked Convenience Store Woman, but Earthlings is bad. I have only read about 1/3 of it, but it's already repulsive. Judging from many of the other reviews here, it sounds like it only gets worse. I'm done. Very disappointed. I mean, if you're grossed out by the first third of it, you probably made the right call in DNFing it, because it does only get worse, and that's why it's good. Um, Auroras Gonzalez says, what the fuck did I just read? I thought this would take my imagination to a nice little place where a girl thought she was an alien in this world. Gruesome book, and sadly my imagination has suffered greatly from the misleading intro. I do think that there is a possibility that you would pick up this book seeing a nice toy hedgehog on the cover and thinking that you were going to get some lovely little novel that may be middle grade, and end up with Earthlings and have a bit of shock. And if that's the case, you have picked up the wrong book. That's not the book's fault. That's just a bad match. You know, if all you do is read middle grade book and then you pick up a literary fiction about literally some of the most repulsive aspects of human society, then yeah, your nicey nice world is going to burst. But, you know, you are living a lie. Benji Braxman writes, this is the worst translated novel I have ever read. Any curious reader would have picked up spelling errors and incorrect grammar, especially in the early chapters. I think the disgusting part was when the 3 so-called friends began to eat each other's flesh. Readers, stay away from this book. That was the disgusting part, was it? What about the rape scene earlier on? Like, what about like, I just don't see how that is the like. That's the thing that's really upset you. I didn't find any problems with the spelling, but I read this one on audio, so you know, I'll let you get away with that. But you know, if you're easily grossed out, this is not the novel for you. CMac4 says 2 stars. I loved Convenience Store Woman, but was very disappointed with Earthlings. You know, if you go onto Facebook and you go to like any political page, say the Democrats, and they talk about a policy that they're going to release, the first comment is always somebody saying, I used to love the Democrats, but ... And you're like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You've never loved the Democrats. You've always loved the Republican Party. But you're just saying that in order to give yourself some false kudos. Like, my opinion is more valid because I once liked you, and it's just rubbish. AJ. This book seems marketed as a quirky, cutesy novel about a woman who thinks that she is an extraterrestrial. But that is a very superficial and somewhat misleading description. It's completely accurate, except that the woman is a young girl. Except that if that's the novel you think you're reading, then yeah, you have... if the marketing people have pushed it like that, then I can see why so many people are upset at this novel, because that's not what it is. This book is dark. Yeah, exactly. The pivotal scenes are disturbing. A child being sexually abused by an adult teacher, an incestuous underage encounter that shatters a family, and a fantastical and extended description of cannibalism. I think that, like, this is clearly spoiler territory now, but I think that to say that the incestual relationship shatters the family completely nullifies the damage that happens to Natsuki and you because of the family's reaction. And that is to completely miss understand the novel. Sure, the insexual relationship happens. I mean, why is the focus here on the incestual relationship when we have two very young children having sex? Um, and and then the response of like this is a complete failure to understand what the author is talking about. It's just like empathizing with the parents who are angry with their daughter for having sex with her cousin is a complete, like, that is not where you're meant to be empathizing. And how could you possibly do that except for the fact that you probably think that, like, this book is pushing taboos, and if you are so set in your ways that you can't hear another view, then you're gonna hate it. I just think that the idea that you think that that shatters the family and you don't look at the two characters who are completely devastated by it, you look at the family relationship, means that you fundamentally misunderstand this novel, and that the way that your recommendation and what you look for in books is fundamentally flawed and shows that I wouldn't trust any of your reviews, AJ. Yeah, this is thought-provoking critical critique of society and the pressures on people, especially women, to conform to societal norms, and that is valuable. But this book was unpleasant reading to an extreme, in my view. I don't understand all the praise. Well, the thing is, I didn't really feel like it was especially towards the women at all. I really thought that anything that was specifically towards the woman was then shown the counteracting pressures that a man would feel in the place of them. I thought that this was quite gender non-specific while acknowledging the differences between the genders. It was pointing out the societal expectations on both genders. So that was an interesting thing. It definitely does talk about societal expectations, and one of the major themes of this novel is bodily autonomy, and the idea that somebody else gets to control your body is discussed in multiple different formats. One of the formats it's discussed in is, I mean, we're not just talking about rape and sexual abuse here. We're talking about the pressures that people feel to procreate and have children, the pressures people feel to hold down a job, the pressures people feel to have a better job from their families, from society, and the pressures people feel to conform with the norm, and how that actually violates bodily autonomy. And this is sort of why we have this cannibal scene, in that Murata is exploring bodily autonomy, and she's exploring it to such an extreme that she decides to go to cannibalism as the ultimate violation or extreme of bodily autonomy. That bodily autonomy can be, but actually with cannibalism, you still have something nourishing the body. So it is actually weird that this book kind of points out that cannibalism is less selfish than rape. The praise of this book is very well justified, in my opinion. Dan Lovejoy says, "Don't believe the hedgehog cover. Utterly revolting. Skip it for your own mental health. If you are fragile, do not read this book. If you want, if if you're having a bad day, maybe pick up something else. Because this book is going to make you feel uncomfortable. That doesn't make it a bad book." Anyway, Dan continues, "While the societal commentary is spot on and the prose is beautiful, this book starts weird, becomes deeply upsetting, and lands on revolting. All of which is 100% true." I can count on one hand the number of books I wish I'd never read because they left such a strong, repulsive after image in my head and kept me awake at night. I can't decide which is I can't decide which is the least revolting part of this book, the emotional abuse or the child-on-child incest. Be aware that it just gets much worse from there. I mean, the thing is, why does incest come up so much in the reviews here? There seems to be two things that are popping up. The, like, expecting a cutesy book, expecting a light read, and getting Earthlings. And I completely understand if you were expecting a lighter read. But we have a book where a teacher rapes a young girl and grooms a young girl. We have a book where a young girl thinks she has superpowers because she has an out-of-body experience in order to cope with her own trauma. And you think the most disgusting part of this is the incest. What the hell is wrong with you? Why does that gross you out too much? That two consenting people, even if they are underage and cousins, have sex, when so much of this book is about the lack of consent? Surely, as a reviewer, you're just pigeonholing that you are a problematic human being for saying such things. The idea that incest grosses people out so much more than rape is a real sign of what is fucked up with our society. Rape is one of, like, it's horrible and should not be on a par with incest unless the rape is your parent or sibling or something. And Dan, you completely miss the point here. Alan Poe, sorry I read this. Wish I'd picked another book. Perhaps the story doesn't translate well, but this is pretty bad all round. A story about what happens when mental illness goes unchecked. Yeah, it kind of was a story about mental illness and how it can go wrong if it is unchecked. But not only was the mental illness unchecked, the people who should have been checking it were contributing to it. Nusky, the poor main character here, is completely abused by not just her teacher who rapes her, but her mother who refuses to believe the rape and punishes her when she brings it up, who refuses to love her as much as she loves her sister, and just completely disowns her in situations and is really completely horrible to her. Nusky's way of coping with this is completely normal mental health issues, and she has nobody to talk to about it, and so she thinks she is an alien with superpowers, and she believes she has a talking pet hedgehog that explains her superpowers. She believes that when her vision goes all red, she's experiencing another superpower. And Nusky's mental health is so bad that she murders somebody and does not realize that she has killed them. Which again is another discussion around bodily autonomy. So yeah, it is a discussion about how mental health can go unchecked. I don't see why that would make it a bad novel. Unchecked mental health is a fact of our society. It's something that authors should be writing about, and I don't think a negative review here is fitting. Ultimately, what I am seeing is that people find this novel disgusting for no People find this novel disgusting and they're repulsed by it. They seem to be repulsed by the least repulsive bits as well. Whether that is because they have DNF'd this book or whether they simply do not wish to talk about some of the other issues raised in this book, I couldn't tell you. But it does seem to be that disgust that people feel. So if you are easily disgusted by incest, this is not your novel. But equally, I mean, I've already said it, but why are you disgusted by incest and not disgusted by rape, not disgusted by the poor parenting, not disgusted by the violence, not disgusted by anything else that is wrong in this novel? Like, not disgusted by the blackmail, not disgusted by just the whole thing. It's really getting upset on the wrong point. And on top of that, we are talking about cousins. And I read a lot of classic literature. The amount of times I have read a novel where two cousins end up married and in love, I couldn't tell you how many, but there's a considerable number of them. It's really, really common. So, getting upset about this novel that includes cannibalism and not getting upset at Jane Austen or the Brontes is just the most absurdly ridiculous thing. This novel, it really reminds me of the novel Freshwater in how it deals with mental health, the out-of-body experience that Ada experiences in Freshwater, which is then put down to being inhabited by different gods, and the out-of-body experience with Natsuki experiences, which she puts down to having superpowers because she's a Puppian, which, by the way, is the best name for an alien race that I have ever come across in my reading. It's similar, and it's quite... It was brilliant in Freshwater, and it's brilliant in Earthlings. The difference with Earthlings is this overwhelming theme of bodily autonomy, the idea that society gets to dictate what your body does, and the exploration of that through cannibalism, through rape, and through murder. It was such a broad conversation about one topic, and bodily autonomy is such a huge topic that goes down so many rabbit holes. But I really felt like Sayaka Murata had really thought about, well, let's start with the obvious things and let's now explore some of the more, let's really take this to the nth degree. Let's really go completely overboard and see what we can say about it. And that's why this novel doesn't begin with cannibalism. That's why this novel begins with a mistreated girl and a mistreated boy who are friends and decide to get married at a young age. And that results over a considerable period of time in them being intimate. And that is the least gross thing. That is the first thing that happens. And then everything else gets a little bit more confronting, and we're taking this idea of bodily autonomy and we're pushing it a bit further. But actually, we're beginning with a really simple idea, and the treatment of this idea and the different ways that it is discussed makes this book so good. I think that The problem is, if you think that this novel is a horror novel, if you think this novel is anything other than hardcore literary fiction, then you're going to be in for a mistake. This is a literary fiction novel discussing hardcore themes, and that is what you need to expect. Again, this is one of the best novels I've read, and I hope that you manage to pick up a copy and read it. If you have read this book, let me know what you thought of it in the comments. Let me know if you liked it as much as me. Let me know if you disagree. And let me know if you were grossed out by it and couldn't put that grossness aside to experience it. Okay, bye.